I thank you once again for joining us to the Illuminations Media Network. I'm Tamara Taggart, your host, and I'm super excited to share another luminary. We are spotlighting our guest, D. Neil Elliott. He's the author of A Higher Road. And in this book, we are going to go deep into the connections between science and spirituality, which you have been following the Illuminations Media Network and Beyond Hypnosis for a while. You know that that is what we are all about. So welcome to the show, Neil. I'm so grateful you joined us today. Please, since you are brand new to the Illuminations Media Network family, please give us just a brief background of you, and then we can move on into this juicy book.
Well, thank you so much, Tamara. A pleasure to be here. So, brief background, born in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Lived across Canada in a few different areas. Currently 61 years old. Married with 3 kids, combined family, so 3 kids and 5 grandkids. And my grandkids are all Texans. My daughter moved to Texas and married a Texan, so they're all down there. Professional engineer with an MBA, and I've worked over 30 years in the hydroelectric industry, and in the last 20 years as a consultant. So that's kind of it, and yeah, that's summary.
Well, welcome. I'm just so grateful you agreed to be interviewed here on the Illuminations Media Network. Your book is amazing. It is definitely a breakthrough, and I think it's going to definitely change the lives of many people, especially my listeners. My listeners are so ready for that deep information. In your book, it's entitled A Higher Road: Secrets of Existence and Our True Spiritual Origins. This is what you're speaking to in this book. And that is what I love, love, love. So as we begin to discuss this, to whet the appetite so that everyone can grab a hold to this book, is looking at that juncture that we're at right now. You know, it looks like we're really, really connecting the spiritual with science. And you really touch on that in this book. And I would just like to ask, what is it that we as spiritual beings having a physical experience, what is it that we really need to understand about bridging that?
That's a great question. I think there's a number of things that, so materialistic science tends to perpetuate a mutually exclusive view of science and spirituality. And as you know, that you've read my book, I take the basic materialistic science and utilize things that we know today that bridge the gap to spirituality. And really the book is about bridging spiritual to science. And for me in particular, being an engineer, I, in order to really explore that and understand the spiritual aspects of ourselves, I needed that foundation. So this material for me that I share in the book really enabled me to move beyond what we know in science and move into that spiritual realm. And I think the fundamental thing is that materialistic science believes that after the Big Bang, and they don't know what caused the Big Bang or what was before the Big Bang, but they believe things like electromagnetism just is. And if you talk to electrical engineers, we use electricity in many aspects of our lives, but what we don't really understand is where it came from. And what I share in the book is how and why. What I share in the book is what was before the Big Bang the impetus for the Big Bang and the reason electromagnetism was actually created, and then how that is essentially what we are. We are energy. At a very deep level, we are energy. At a subatomic level, we know from science today that we are energy. So when you actually understand this, you can start to get a better grasp on where we came from and what we're here to do.
That's deep. And the impetus for your book, you had hit a very low period in your life. You know, as often when we go to a low place, that's the place where we really catapult into who we really are. You know, when we start questioning, you know, why am I here? What's really going on here? And this is what brought you to this, to this self-discovery. What is the value of self-awareness? And you certainly spoke to that earlier about knowing who we really are and getting to that place of understanding the connection. But for you, what was the value of you really getting to know who you are?
So self-awareness for many people can mean many different things. So when I actually understood where we come from and why we are here, I could also start to unravel how I created my every tomorrow by my thinking and by my feeling. And when you understand the dynamics of this and how it actually works in our world, in our human form, then you can start to transcend the issues that cause pain and misery and suffering. And so for me, you know, like you said, I came to a very low point in my life, and to the point of crafting a suicide note. So I had come across some information that promised to liberate me from my thinking, because when you're in a deep depression, so depression for me, and I think it probably does for everybody, creeps on very slowly. And you become more and more depressed, and you kind of get locked into this thinking. And at some point for me, it was just like, so as you've just mentioned, what's the purpose? Like, why are we here? Like, this just seems so pointless. You know, I'm in this misery and I'm in this pain and this deep depression, and I just couldn't see any value with carrying on. And so when I got this information and I digested this information, I followed the process, which I share in my book. It's 7 steps. You can gain an understanding of how you got there, why you're there, and what the real meaning of is it for you. So it's through, you know, lessons of suffering that the journeying soul finally wakes up and understands what it's doing to itself. And when your soul wakes up and does that, then you start to set yourself up for inviting the divine, if you will, or God, whatever you want to call it, to help you with that process. And as soon as you start that process, you go through a process of awakening. And I tell you, just a year after I started that process, my life totally transformed. I was just full of peace and full of love, and I was deeply grateful for everything I owned and things that I had collected over the years and amassed. It's, you know, I don't need this. It doesn't add value to me in my life, and somebody else can use it. So why not just give it away and let somebody else actually enjoy that? And I find now that the less I own, the happier I am.
Yes. Well, you know, Neil, this touches deeply on the work that I do. When I'm not a radio host, I'm a hypnotherapist, so I work deeply with the subconscious mind and beliefs. And what I find working with people through the years, and, you know, working through myself, because we definitely tend to work in and teach what we most need to learn. The idea of problem and pain and suffering is all about not the what, but the meaning that we place on the experience. That meaning of what we're saying something means about us, essentially. Whether we believe that the universe is a safe place or if it's a dangerous place. If we believe that we are powerless, or if we believe and know who we really are, which is what I'm discerning, from your book, that you moved through a process where you woke up to who you really are, and that suffering was able to fall away because you changed the meaning. Wow.
Yes, and I will take your words and I'm going to phrase it slightly differently, just out of my language. What we perceive to be real, true or false, good or bad, is really only predicated on our beliefs. And so whatever we believe, we will perceive as what our external environment is. And a great example of this is I had a friend who was taking a walk the other day, and they were walking together, and a woman came out of a second level building. There's some long steps. She came out of the second level building, and she was quite angry, and she was gesturing and yelling, and she stared down at them and said, "Go ahead and stare all you want." The one individual said, "Oh my God, I think I need to phone the police." And so she's on the phone over, phoning the police about this woman coming down. And the second individual kind of looked up and went, "Oh my God, are you okay? Is something wrong?" And that different reaction is strictly just what those two people individually believe in their hearts and who they are, and it's their view of the world. And so all of us create our own world and our own environment by our beliefs.
Yes. And the only experience that we're ever having is right here within our own heads. It's really amazing. It is definitely all about consciousness. And you spoke to 7 steps of the higher road. Could you break those steps down to us so we can get a little taste of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first is I introduce some information around consciousness and my understanding of consciousness for you to consider, for the reader to consider. Then I introduce this scientific material to try and working to build this foundation, to lay a solid foundation. The first step is a third-party experience of a near-death experience. Okay. And what she describes was a description of consciousness that I had never considered before and didn't understand. But her story is so believable, and the reason, and so the book is Anita Morjani, and it's Dying to Be Me, and she suffered 4 years from this aggressive cancer that finally caused her to go into a coma, and she was rushed to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, her husband and the admitting physicians assessed Anita and said she wouldn't make it through the night. She was in this, her body was riddled with cancer. She had these big lesions, and, it was kind of from her midsection all the way up to her head. And while she was in this coma, she describes, after she came out, she woke up 24 hours after admitting to the hospital, about 24 hours, and declared she was going to be okay. And within 2 weeks, the doctors couldn't find a trace of cancer in her body. Then they kept her in longer to keep doing tests, but they couldn't find it. Finally, she protested and left the hospital. But the important part about this is that she describes what she experienced while she was in that coma. And that experience and her understanding and how she describes it will just give you an entirely new perception of what consciousness is. So that's the first thing. So we lay a foundation, and then what we do is we stretch your mind in terms of what consciousness is. The next step is I introduce you to this blueprint material that I want to share with people that changed my life and transformed my life. So we introduced this material, and it's, I put some excerpts in, and then I provide a compendium of all of the material that I put together. I have it in a PDF. And after people have read this, my book, and decide they want to go back and start with step one, they can request the compendium, and I will send that to them. So it's a free piece of information. Then the next step in this process is to learn how to cleanse your consciousness. And this is a very specific process that you go through, and you do this. And then what we do is we rebuild your consciousness into beliefs and understanding that is consistent with where we actually come from, what our true reality is. And in order to do all of this process, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to learn how to meditate, and we're going to learn a very specific meditation that enables you to, and I'll describe this in a moment, but it enables you to actually connect with the divine so that you can get assistance in this process. And then it's a bit of a rinse and repeat. So you'll go back and you'll do some steps. I missed out, there's one step there. After I introduce this material, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to write yourself a letter, which is what your current state is like. And this is a letter that's only for you and your eyes only. You're going to write it. You're going to be truthful. If you're happy about being alive, then do it. If you're sad and depressed and rather end it, those are the kinds of things that you're going to stick in this letter. And the reason you're going to do this is because a year after, you're going to open that letter and you're going to be able to mark how much you've changed in terms of your belief system and how you're feeling. And so for me, I didn't even have to open my letter. I was deeply depressed. I was going to commit suicide. And a year later, it was full of peace, love, joy, happy to be alive, and wanting to share this information from the rooftops.
And something just came up for me when you were speaking about understanding the electromagnetic idea, that combination or blending the force of electricity and magnetism, electromagnetism. I had a dream probably about 20 years ago, and I don't know where it came from, but I was told by some elderly person in my mind that once you understand electromagnetism, you will understand everything. And
really? Wow.
yes, and so I would just love for you, and I know that it's probably a very deep topic, but just kind of looking at that energy, that as an engineer, how do you describe this? I mean, I sense that there is life in it. There's definitely power in it, and certainly power to create.
Yeah, so another very good point. So we'll back up a little bit and let's talk about, so I'll just give everybody a brief overview of what the book is about, and then we'll get into some of the science aspects so we can talk about the topic that you're discussing right now. So my book is, my preferred method, or my recommended method of reading my book, is you read it from cover to cover. So you understand the process in its entirety, and you're introduced to this material. And then you make a decision for yourself of whether these 7 steps make sense for you. And if you do, then go back and start with either some of the science material or directly with step 1. So the first part of my book is a brief memoir of how my experience in childhood and how I took that through my thinking and my beliefs and what I learned and how I was exposed to create my every tomorrow. And we'll talk about electromagnetism in a minute with that. And that's how essentially it's a story, it's an illustration of how I created my external environment, as you said, what we think up here, and how that affected me and how it reinforced itself over the years and got me to that place of where I was going to commit suicide. The next part of my book is around science, and what I utilize is some specific material and specific authors to take people through a process to lay a foundation. So it's a foundation based in science. Everybody should understand it. And it's stuff that some of the things that they will already know. And then there's going to be some things that maybe they haven't, learned about yet, but it's all based in science. Then in the following section of the book, I introduce this new material. And I provide some excerpts of that new material just so you get a sense of what that writing is like. And, in my opinion, very easy to read and understand, but it takes a while to kind of digest it. And in the last chapter is my experience, my personal experience as I've gone through these 7 steps. And so when we talk about science, so the first thing we talk about is mind and memes. And, memes are pretty prevalent today, and they've always been prevalent. They just get shared more quickly. But the information that I provide, or the guidance that I provide, is from a third-party author. And that author describes how there are both designer memes and then these, I'll call them accidental memes, things that we just pass on, but how all of that is influencing the way we interact and what we think about and how it affects our thinking. So I call our thinking kind of, consciousness is not necessarily what we think in our brains. It's not residing in this material brain that we have. It is actually all around us. And we think with electrical impulses in our brain, and we feel with magnetic impulses in our nervous system. And so the next bit of scientific information I share is how our thinking, and this is based in science and it's got research associated with it, how our thinking affects our cell structure and the expression, the work that the cell does, which is really the expression of that cell. And depending on our thinking, and I talk quite a bit about consciousness before we get to this, but depending on what we think about and what we feel will affect our cells, and that will either have them express things which cause us pain and misery or illness, or make those cells, or continue to keep those cells healthy and allow the body to heal those cells. Then I introduce people to some neuroscience and how we have discovered that the brain can be repaired by what we think and what we do. And, it used to be that, the brain gets damaged, it dies as it gets older, but that is not true. We can grow new brain cells. We can actually change our neural pathways. And so this material describes all of that. And so when we think with electrical impulses in our brain and we feel with magnetic impulses in our nervous system, we're actually affecting the expression of our cells, which can create illness or health. And it is that electromagnetism, which is the very basic form of energy that has created elements, and elements got together, not randomly, but with direction to create living molecules. And those living molecules were, got together under direction to create living cells. And the cell is this magnificent thing. It's flimsy, so to speak, but it's this magnificent thing with this permeable membrane that can accept the kind of food that's going to make it healthy, discern that it has waste, and rid itself of the waste. And we know this from science, but we don't know what that directional power is that gives it that discernment. So the question is, when did consciousness first creep into living material? That is the question. And what my book addresses is not only that, but how this fundamental energy of electromagnetism, how we use it moment by moment to create our every experience and attract this into our lives, whether it be it good or bad, things we really enjoy or merely endure. I hope I answered your question there.
You did, absolutely. And I love the way you expressed that. That right there will tell anyone who's wallowing in pain and in a very low place that wow, there is so much more than just me, and I want to know more about it. and that right there is awesome. That is going to inspire me, and I'm hoping, viewers and listeners, that you will dig deeply into this book, because this book has the receipts, if you will. He gives you the bibliography, where to go and do your own research. You certainly don't want to believe anything that anyone is saying. You want to find out for yourself. But, I believe that the reason that we're all here together in this collective adventure called life is to inspire one another. Someone will pick up one piece, another one will pick up another piece, and it's for us to gather all of that and to create lives that are just wonderful. Create a world that works for everyone, and everyone needs to be aware and fully equipped of the truth of who we are. And you have definitely given us an amazing piece in that puzzle. I'm so appreciative of this.
Well, thank you. I mean, my goal is this process worked for me. This information that I share worked for me. And I'm hoping that it can work for many others. That, we all know that there's people that are in pain and suffering, and it's visible that they are. But you can never judge the inner reality of another person. We're all great actors. We put on this facade, and we know from, just listening to the news or the tabloids, that there's many people that, are wealthy and well-heeled, so to speak, have lots of education, and are talented at what they do, but they're actually miserable inside. And we see that through the expression of, drugs or alcohol or, self-sabotage. And there's examples of it. So, what we present to the world, we can present whatever we like. And we all want to be viewed in the best way possible for the situation. So we all tend to act. That acting is fine and that's good, but that's not what's going to keep you healthy or cause destruction in your life. It's actually your thinking and your feeling. So you have to change your consciousness in order to change your life.
So this book, Neil, this is a masterclass, and you are the consciousness engineer.
That's very kind.
Yes, it's true. I'm seeing it. You've broken it down into a very practical, step by step. You've built it. You've constructed it, and I think this is what we need. I mean, a lot of people are grasping at. There's so many self-help books, meditation books, spirituality. There's all kinds of information that people are grabbing at. And people try one thing for a little bit, it doesn't work right away. They go to another one, they find a guru, all of that. And you put it all together. You put it together and you've built a brick house, if you will, of a structure that people can actually work with to get here. And Wow. I just want everyone, I've read the book. I've read it from cover to cover. I'm going to read it, go back and read it again. I'm going to follow instructions. And I just invite you to go and get this book. I'm definitely going to have the links directly to where you can get the book and to Neil's website in the description box. Whether you see it here at the podcast or you see it here on YouTube, those links will be there so that you don't have to go searching. You can just go right to it. This has been amazing. And so my time flies, Neil. So just one final thing. What is it? If you wanted to offer one takeaway that you want the readers, the listeners, the viewers, to really get from this wonderful book, what is that one takeaway?
So before I answer that question, I want people to know that none of this information comes from me. I'm merely an instrument. I'm sharing this information that I've learned. And so I don't take ownership of the authorship of this blueprint material. So that's first thing. I think the one thing I'd like people to take away is that no matter where you are, you can transform your life and you can help change the world to one of love, peace, and joy. And we will create this new era of love and peace through individual transformations. And then we'll start teaching our children this. And then over the generations, we will create an entirely new situation for the planet.
I'm telling you, tears have come to my eyes, Neil, because this is exactly my goal. And because it's just time. It's time out for all of the craziness. It's really time for us to step up to who we are as these spiritual beings that are just so powerful beyond measure. But I thank you, everyone. So grateful that you were with us today, Neil, Elliott, everyone. Please click those links and do get this book. And I thank you so much, Neil, for joining us here on the Illuminations Media Network. I'm hoping that you can come back for another conversation.
I'd love to do that. And it's my pleasure. Like, I'm with you. I would like everybody to read this book and make a decision for themselves.
Yes.
And if they decide it's not for them, that's totally fine. But then just pass the book along to somebody else, because as I said earlier, you can never judge the inner reality of another person.
I thank you so much for joining us. This was a phenomenal, eye-opening interview. I welcome you to subscribe and to become a member and to come on back when we have another fantastic interview here on the Illuminations Media Network. I'm Tamara Taggart, your host, and I'm bidding you farewell. And I just invite you to really take a look at your beliefs and see if you can shift your perspectives and thus shift your life in wonderful ways. Until next time, take good care in health, wisdom, and power. And while you're there at Amazon, pick up Spiritual Healing Through a Breakup, partnering with pain to navigate any difficult life change. This is not just about a romantic breakup. These 28 pages are jam-packed with tools that will help you to forgive, to let go of the past, and to navigate through anything that has a belief around victimhood. Head over to Amazon now.